Give me the best and worst moment of these first 90-some days. Best and worst moment. Take the mic close enough so they can hear your stellar thoughts, Mr. Greider.
The experience of the inauguration transported me, my family, the country, and it was rare, and we're in some ways still savoring that. I think, and I've written this more than once, Barack Obama, whatever else happens to him, is a great teacher. And I mean, he changed the country because he had the courage to see a different country and then tell us what he saw. And people responded to that. That's what is my residual hope. I have enormous sympathy for the dilemmas he faces because, for all the reasons we've all been saying, he doesn't inherit a governing system that shares that perspective. And some of it is just inertia, some of it is reactionary status quo, some of it is wicked, to put it crudely. So I recognize that he can't turn the ship around as quickly as I would like to see him try. But I think, as Donna said, that doesn't relieve us of our role, which is to be the people who say the things that aren't quite ready for prime time, and to sketch out for the public, not so much Washington, but the people, that you can think this way. And I think Obama has already, as president, contributed enormously to that spirit. And I think people will build on that, whether he invites it or not. He's opened the doors, and now they can talk about things like what we're talking about.
That's the best. The worst is just, yes or no, Geithner?
Larry, Tim,
Larry Summers is
Tiny
actually...
Tim and Larry.
All right, there you go. William Greider. Deepak Bhargava, the same question.
My worst and my best are connected. So the worst was the night of the, wasn't a State of the Union, the almost State of the Union, getting a call towards the close of that speech that there was an immigration raid in Bellingham, Washington, where immigrant workers were picked up and detained, and thinking to myself, oh my God, we haven't changed a goddamn thing. People are still subject to this terror in their homes, in their communities, in their workplace. The best moment is related to the mobilization that happened against the administration in response to that raid. Hundreds of press statements, thousands of calls, pushing, till essentially 2 weeks later, front page of the New York Times, above the fold, a commitment from the White House to move forward on immigration reform this year. So it is absolutely, the lesson of that story is that it is absolutely our responsibility to push like hell to get the kind of country we deserve.
Deepak Bhargava. Ari Melber, best and worst.
The worst moments have been when President Obama and his aides have taken a political and false view of the rule of law and the accountability we need for all the crimes that were committed. And to talk about it, especially from someone with the legal training that he has, as an issue of the past versus the future, when we all know the Justice Department enforces laws in the past. The only time you enforce laws in the future is in Minority Report with Tom Cruise, a movie about enforcing future laws, not actually anything to do with reality. When he does that, and when Rahm Emanuel and David Axelrod, and under his urging recently, talk about that and talk about re-litigation of these issues, is what Axelrod said, when these issues have not been litigated. And in the rare cases where they're all civil suits, the administration, as I said, is using the tools of the Bush administration's legal architecture to shut down that litigation. So it's false and it's wrong, and those are some really terrible moments. The best moments to me relate to the clear break on actively saying we're not going to torture, we're going to close Guantanamo, and they came together for me in watching the president sit down and do that interview with Al Arabiya and take hard questions from a foreign correspondent and speak directly to people around the world with a dignity and a respect that makes me really proud to be an American and really proud that this nation elected him. When he does those things, he is an unusual and excellent leader.
Ari Melber. Katrina
Katrina
vanden Heuvel, best and worst.
There's so many, but I want to pick up on what Ari said, because this idea of what Barack Obama's election meant in terms of the sense of a country that had a sense of decency, a sense of the importance of diversity, of tolerance, because this country had been stripped of so much in the last 8 years. But Barack Obama's engagement with the world built on a sense of mutual respect, and also hearing a president restore science to its proper role after years of ideological rule, and in that sense repealing the global gag rule, and that in terms of the fight ahead, let's not forget that I think it took Robert Reich 3 years to use the word labor, and he was the Secretary of Labor. To hear a president say, well, I like Robert Reich, but to hear a president say that labor is part of the solution, not part of the problem, and the Hilda Solis appointment. I agree with Ari about closing the promise to close Guantanamo and torture. And I would argue we all think it was too small, but the recovery and reinvestment bill was, an important break with decades of deficit reduction. We're not going to rebuild an infrastructure. We're not going to rebuild this country. There's more to do with the budget. The worst, I will admit that one reason I supported Barack Obama was I didn't want to see Larry Summers or Richard Holbrooke back in the White House. So related to that in a more structural sense, the bank bailouts and the military escalation in Afghanistan worry me. Finally, the fight ahead links to one other good thing, and some of this informed by IPS's very good report on the 100 days. Let's not forget the signing of the health care bill for children, which was twice vetoed by Bush. Yeah. If they can find billions for these banks and they couldn't find the money for health care, that is a prefiguring, I hope, of a fight ahead. Thank you.
Katrina vanden Heuvel, who I might add, as a classic nation person, got like 15 things into the best and worst there, which was very good. Chris Hayes.
Yeah, I think we haven't talked, Deepak, the poverty spending that Deepak talked about was in the stimulus, and I think that was a pretty remarkable bill. It's not easy to get $800 billion in social, largely programs for infrastructure.
Unless you're a bank.
Yeah, exactly. That's not an easy, that wasn't a small accomplishment, and I think, like Deepak said, that there's a lot of things in there that are really, really good. I don't think it was the size it should have been. It would have been different if I was the one holding the magic wand that created the manna falling from heaven, but I'm not, and Barack Obama isn't, and the bill was a really good bill, and signing it was a really great moment. I also think, since Katrina did more than one, that I'll do more than one.
Don't use her as license.
I'll very quickly say that I think releasing the memos yesterday, 2 days ago, 5 days ago, was gutsy, was the right thing to do. It would have been the wrong thing to do not to do it, but it was, I think it was a high point, because we have to look into the darkness that covered this country for a lot of years, and the fact that we induced drowning in a man 183 times in a month. There are some really, really dark things done in this country, and we need to pull them out into the light, as unpleasant and difficult as that's going to be politically, and I thought it was gutsy for them to release it. The worst moment, I think, was when they basically sabotaged efforts in the House to attach strings to the second amount of TARP funding. They basically said, now look, someone shows up at your door and says, you have two options. You get $350 billion with no strings attached and $350 with strings attached. Well, okay, fine, sure. Everyone says, I'll just take the money with no strings attached. So I understand where they were coming from. But that, to me, was the first bad sign about the shape of the financial rescue, because they basically said, don't worry, guys, we got this, and we're sort of seeing the results of that.
Chris Hayes. Can you just pull that down? Can you pull that one over there? Congressman Steve Cohen from Tennessee.
Thank you.
Best and worst.
the best, I guess, was the recovery and reinvestment and/or the budget, both of which had the same type of vein in them. There was a lot of changes in social policy that we need, science, education, healthcare, essentials, which we haven't seen an emphasis on, clean energy and all. And the worst I'd have to imagine would be, and maybe this has involved in it, but I thought it was the day we had the bill up on giving bankruptcy judges the right to reform the mortgages, and we didn't have the votes on suspension, and we didn't bring it back up again, and the Senate probably wasn't going to do it either. But that was an important bill we should have had, and we just failed.
Congressman Steve Cohen. And here I can, and Congresswoman Donna Edwards.
Thank you. This is a really tough call. I think, coming out of the dark days of the last 8 years, there have been actually quite a number of highlight best moments, starting with the president's inauguration. And so it's really tough to choose. I think best for me is simply coming into a new year with a new president and Congress actually working on things that make a difference in people's lives and having them signed into law, and then going toward the implementation. And I know in my congressional district, being able to actually go out into the district and to see the pre-K program that didn't have to shut down because they got money from the Recovery and Reinvestment Act. To know that in the in the omnibus appropriations bill that we passed and was signed into law precisely because we couldn't get the appropriations measures through the last president, but we were able to do that now. And so a state like Maryland, kids get to enjoy a supper program when they also receive free and reduced lunch. That stuff is really meaningful to the people in my district and around the country. And so those are highlight best moments because we have a president who's willing to sign the legislation that a solid Congress can pass. Now, worst moments, okay, there are a couple of those on the highlight reel too. And I had not been one of those who was, I've been more in line with the president in terms of wanting to, to move forward and, not forget the past, but let's not dwell on it because we wouldn't get anything done. And I have to tell you that really the reality check of these last several days and looking at what the administration did, I am more convinced than ever before that moving forward requires us to look back. And I had not been there before. And so like Chris, I'm grateful that we have a president who had the guts to put that stuff out there. And I think that we, and with Mr. Cohen and Mr. Conyers, Chairman Conyers' help, will try to lay the groundwork, the framework for how it is that we're going to look to the past and not just look about accountability going forward, but accountability backwards as well. And I am just more convinced than ever before that we have to do that. Thank you. These are all my old buddies. I see the woman I chose to take my place at the foundation over here. I haven't seen her in a while. How are you?
Hey, great job. Hey, thank you. It's good. Easy with good panel.
Hey, so good to see you.
Hey, brother, it's fantastic. No, well,